Hello and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Building Magazine in association with Autodesk. My name is Chloe McCulloch and I'm editor at Building Magazine. So the topic for discussion today is delivering transformation, and of course we're talking about digital transformation because this is all part of Digital Building Week. In fact, it's the last webinar of many that we've been running since Monday. So welcome to this last webinar. If you've missed any or want to check back on any of the details that are coming up in this webinar, you'll find them all on our website, building.co.uk. So first of all, let me introduce you to this panel of experts that we've got for you today. We've got Mark Boyle, Group Design Director at Robert Bird, Simon Rawlinson, Partner and Head of Strategic Research and Insights at Arcadis. We've got Jack Stewart, Digital Design Lead at Hawkins Brown, Fabio Roberti, Head of BIM at Wilkinson Air, and Daniel Wood, Technical Specialist at Autodesk. So we will be running through their presentations in that order. They've got a strict 8 minutes per presentation to try and stick to, and I will try to remind them if they look like they're overrunning, just so that we get through all the presentations. But a reminder to all of you as well, everyone who's listening, please do post questions, and we've got we've set aside sort of 15 to 10 minutes to try and round up some of your questions on that. So post those and we will get to them. So for now, what I want to do is I am going to start off with Mark. He's already in presenter mode, so I think the rest of us will turn off our webcams and we'll hand over to Mark. And over to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, if you can put it in present mode, and Daniel, if you could turn your webcam off for now, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can see my presentation okay. I'm Mark Boyle. I'm Group Design Director for Robert Bird Group. I'm also a digital design leader. I'm a practicing project director. I still have, this is one of my jobs here, which is called Elizabeth House, which is next to Waterloo Station. This particular job is a 108-meter span bridge building. It's got a 30-story tower sitting on top of this 108-meter span, which goes over the clear over several tube lines, 3 tube lines underneath. We use digital tools here extensively for this. So this one has a particular form-found arch that we have that responds to the particular loads that we're having, which is quite substantial, as you can imagine, for a bridge building. So this is a genetic algorithm that we're using to find the arch here for this form find. I'll have to click this through. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about consultant working. So I am a consultant, and this is what the last 6 months have looked like for me. I took this picture earlier this week. This is my desk in my living room. We have got at RBG, we've got 200 UK staff. Most of us are at home. At the moment, we've got maybe 20, 25 in the office. We've taken on some new graduates there in the office, and so I go in out maybe once every week, every other week. But most of us are at home working, and we're designing, delivering, we're winning projects, and indeed we're carrying on our site visits, everything from working from home. And there is some good and bad things to that. So first thing good is we've proven that we can work from home, which is great. We've got the technology now, we know we can do it. We've proven we can be agile and productive. Some tasks I think are more productive at home, like reading reports and time we need a bit of private thinking. It's great. No long commutes, no overseas trips. It's had a positive impact on my home life balance. My kids are at school today, otherwise you might see them popping up on the webcam, and I think that's not a bad thing actually. But they're at school today. But there has been some bad things, particularly there was a lot of kids during lockdown were hanging around, and that was difficult to manage that. Collaboration and building trust has been pretty hard. Holding what I would call company values together, so a collective opinion how we're approaching things, and trust in each other. Mentoring and training suffers, I think, working from home. New clients are hard to get. It's hard to you can clients want to understand that's easy, but new clients is quite tricky. And we've less than ideal homework setups in some of our some of our home lives. And just some of the ugly values is perhaps maybe bad hair, and certainly kids and partners and dogs and flatmates popping up on calls times. But I think we should embrace that. This is an example of a bid meeting I had earlier this week. So I'm in Hove. The person putting together documents, Fleur, she was in Cambridge. Someone up in Birmingham, and my colleague is in a car park in Guildford. So he's able to be agile. He had to drop his kids off. So this is an example of how we're working now. This just didn't happen. A few years ago, we'd have been just in the office doing this, or 6 months ago, we'd have been in the office doing this. So what does life look like for us consultants for the next 6 months? So we're having to create COVID safe office. We need to get safe physical collaboration spaces, because we are suffering from not being able to have that face-to-face contact, and what I would call mixed mode working, which is we're able to talk to clients, we're able to talk to ourselves, some of us in the flesh, some of us remote, and that's quite difficult to do. And meeting with clients. So we've got a couple of techniques that we're trialing now to do this. One thing is we've developed an app in our business to book seats, so we can safely book seats in and around our office. We've got a capacity of about 70 in an office that normally sits 200. So when you want to come into the office, you book your seat in the app. It saves our admin having to do all that. It also means if we have an outbreak, we can track and trace people quite quickly, and we can isolate people that were in the vicinity of that person throughout the day. And we're setting up collaboration spaces. This particular one is what we call a whiteboard space. It's a mixed mode working space between online and in the flesh, looking at drawings. So very quickly on this, and I think Simon's going to talk more about this, but we've seen a shift in markets. Things like healthcare, residential refurbs, schools and infrastructure, and online retail have all gone up. But things have gone down, such as shops, retail, hotel, sports, airports, commercial offices. So what are the digital things that we can do to help with these shifting patterns? Some helpful technology, this one might run. So this is what we call, we see a lot of these, which are generators, which help us to understand and rapidly process options for sites. This particular generator is a massing one. It also gives quantity. So we have a site, we can look at it very quickly. We've got digital twins. We can do digital rehearsals. I think I'll show you a slide of that in a second. Offsite modular and low carbon technology are things we should be doing. I'm nearly there. So this is a digital rehearsal. If this one plays, it's just basically we've got these technologies now we can use to do 3D animations of sites, of developments. And finally, just some other useful technologies we've got, and a question to the floor is why we're not adopting these really, is we have a lot of data-led technology and wearable technology, and we need to take a leap of faith, I think, to be able to use some of these technologies around our sites and help drive our recovery by being efficient on our sites in the future. And I think that might be out of time, so apologies for that, and I'll hand over to the next presenter.
Oh, well, actually, I think you're pretty good on your timing there. So thank you very much for that, Mark. Just a quick catch up before I forget. Just that last slide. Can I just make sure I've understood your point there? That you're saying there is a lot of wearable technology, but you feel like actually it's not getting used yet. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the issue is there's a lot of wearable technology and technologies there, and I think the problem is that in order for sites to do this, they need to kind of adopt it. And actually in COVID, what we were trying to do was just basically get sites back and up and running. So there was very little drive to kind of use some of these technologies for what they're at. So they are available, and whereas in consultancy we did adopt these technologies. We've gone from working in the office to working at home because we were forced to. Sites were not. So I think you know what will drive the use of these technologies won't be COVID. It'll be something else, and it's a competitive edge. I think is what we have to find. And consultants and contractors got to adopt it to get that competitive edge, but it takes a leap of faith.
Brilliant. Okay, well maybe that's something that we can come back to in our general discussion. Okay, so for now we're going to hand over to Simon. I think I need to change the presenter mode so I can make you the presenter. So hold on 1 second. Right, it should be across to you now. So Mark and I are going to disappear now. Over
Hopefully you can see a nice orange slide there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to just briefly describe some of the things that Arcadis are doing. I'm going to make 3 points at different scales. The first one is around projects, and I'm going to talk about program resilience. And I think that's something that's going to be important, not just in the past 6 months, but going forward, who knows, maybe the next year or so. The second one is around actually at the organisation level, and just discussing very briefly some of the things that Arcadis has been doing to accelerate our own innovation pathway. And generally that tends to be self-development of tools rather than using sort of products that are already out there in the marketplace, and also changing the way that we approach our clients. And finally, I just want to reflect on what's going on in the wider industry, using some of my perspectives from the Construction Leadership Council, and particularly the digital transformation that's being led by the Construction the Construction Innovation Hub. So briefly, just going on to a couple of slides. So my sample project at the program level, I decided to be a little bit ambitious, and I'm looking at Lower Thames Crossing. So this is a program that Arcadis has been on since about 2014. We're working with Jacobs and Cowie. It's a team of 600 people, and they're not just located in the UK, they're working globally as well. And the reflection here is that this, before COVID came along, this already was a digital project. And actually having that resilience in place, the ability and the emergency plans in place to make sure that everybody on a extremely sort of program dependent, very complex project could continue maintaining their work in a very interrelated way, is a real reflection actually on the fact that the industry has already been transformed by digital. And the other observation I'd make is that actually a lot of that innovation is not so necessarily in the tools that we use to, say, for example, sort of simulate various aspects of the way in which the asset might perform, but it's also around the way in which information is managed. And if one thinks about some of the lessons learned around the very long-running BIM implementation program that's now been running for 10 years in the UK, it's often the plumbing, it's often the integration of information that's the greatest challenge. And I think actually that COVID will be really good in sort of accelerating the development of those disciplines. And in terms of, just to reflect that, the DCO for Lower Thames Crossing, the UK's largest ever road-related scheme, is going in about next week, I think. It's only 4 weeks late, and most of the delay associated with the putting together an incredibly complicated submission was actually the site work. Just basically, we couldn't get people to go on site to do the investigations. Nothing to do with the actual team working remotely. So an incredible achievement for the team, but also for the industry as well. So real hats off there. Second one is...
Sorry, Simon.
Can you see my slides?
We can. It's just they're not in presenter mode, and I just thought there's some quite detailed stuff there. You might want to just flick it in.
I'm not going to be worrying about the details, so I'm quite comfortable with that. It's okay, because I can't see what it looks like. This is basically, so this is an example of an innovation that we've been driving forward in-house. It's called Cost Clarity, as you'd expect from a business that combines consulting with engineering. This focuses on our capital cost management basis. And it does 2 things. I mean, I'm not going to get into the detail of it, but one thing is it changes the relationship with our customers. So we're moving from the position where previously we would present information and give it to them and they would absorb it. This is now giving the platform where people can start to interact with that information and use it in their own terms, so they can start to adjust it and such like. So that's actually a change in the way we behave. And secondly, from a point of view of actually using platforms to become much more efficient in the way that we manage information on behalf of our clients, multiple projects on the same platform and such like. It's a project data portal. You might have asked the question, well, your cost managers, why haven't you done that before? And one of the things is probably we've been too busy serving clients and not enough time to actually get people off projects into the management of information. So COVID has proved a really useful platform for us to be able to sort of focus people's activity when they're a little bit quiet, possibly might have otherwise gone onto furlough, to accelerate our development. So a great sort of example of actually using the sort of like the trauma of COVID to take us forward into another area. And finally, my final example is around some of the work that the Hub is doing. Now, these are 3 things that have been sort of issued and published during lockdown. So the information management framework, a quality program project planning guide, and also a piece about systems, about how you bring information and people together. And what this really emphasizes is the fact that actually the transformation is happening whether we like it or not. It's happening whether COVID sticks around or not. And these things are much bigger and much more complicated than many of the little challenges that we've been dealing with over the past 6 months. So I'd really highlight the importance of everybody to get engaged with these things, thinking about how they're going to maintain this acceleration of change that we've seen over the past 6 months, and really invest in what potentially is being a really positive future. So that's for me for now. I don't know, Chloe, whether you've got any extra questions on that before handing over.
Yeah, just a couple of follow-up questions. Well, firstly, those 3 documents that you've got there, I'm assuming those are publicly available through the Construction Innovation Hub.
They are all
Brilliant.
available, and 2 of them were open for consultation earlier this summer, so a lot of work's gone into them.
Okay, so that sounds like recommended reading for our audience, if you want some homework. And then secondly, just that point that you were making about how actually COVID proved to be quite a nice, well, not nice, but a moment for reflection to actually look at how you were managing information. Do you think that that's a common experience? I mean, it can't just be Arcadis that's found this.
Well, I suppose there's 2 things. So if we take the Lower Thames Crossing example, if that hadn't been utterly robust from the get-go, we would have had a real problem. So the reflection there is that the good old prior planning, guarantees performance is never going to be, that lesson is never going to be learned harder than probably the people thinking how we're going to run our projects the day the office is closed. The opportunity to accelerate innovation, I hope that other organisations have taken that, because I suspect it's just one of those things that even though we aspired to do this stuff, we really didn't have the bandwidth until effectively there was a bit of a slowdown in parts of our business, which created the space to do it.
Great. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to hear from our audience any observations or questions that you've got around any of that. So thank you so much for that, Simon. Right, we're going to move on to Jack now. So I'm going to attempt to make Jack the presenter. Here we go. So you should be able to now share your screen. Is that working for you, Jack?
I can share my screen. It doesn't. Okay, yeah, share my screen. Just a slight delay.
And if you make it to presenter mode, and then it's
Is that all good?
Yeah. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Jack Stewart. I'm a digital design lead at Hawkins Brown Architects, and I'm going to talk about digital transformation, but focusing on kind of how we do this through projects in the office. This is us not being particularly socially distant, but obviously taken before COVID. This is kind of us now, as many of you will be working sort of remotely and collaborating through your laptops. And this is the kind of stuff that we do. We spread across all sorts of sectors. We're 300 staff in total, spread across 4 locations that are in the UK and in the US. We're working commercial, in the sort of culture sector, civic community culture, education, infrastructure, residential, and interiors. So we're spread across a lot of different sectors within the practice. Today, I'm going to try to condense all this down into 8 minutes, and as I say, talk about how we use projects to research new technologies. And there's some context to that, and then there are kind of 3 areas that we've really benefited from, which is automation in the design process, and then also in the build process through digital fabrication. So the industry is changing. This is something that's probably not new to a lot of the people that are in this room, I mean, this is kind of how architects are used to work, sort of 100 years ago. Things moved, and this was a bit of kind of technology at the time, the drawing board. And then, you know, in the 80s, moving into sort of two-dimensional drawing in the computer. And I think this was in the 80s, 90s, there was actually 3D available, although in the architecture industry, it's kind of been adopted much more later than that. And really today we're still building from like 2D information. And I'm sorry, Mark, we've got the same image in our presentations, but this is kind of where we think we're moving to next. And we kind of believe that this is because there's a growing amount of built environment design and construction data. And there are huge opportunities for architects and for other professionals in the built environment industry to leverage off that data and create kind of new methods, new tools, new techniques for delivering places for people and buildings and places for clients. I'm not going to read this entire thing. You can read it if you like, but it was a really interesting quote from a book that I read in university, and it talks about how in the future architects may be actually spending more time developing the software and the systems for existing structures than actually kind of doing what they do now and building kind of new physical buildings. And I thought it was quite interesting. This was written in 2009, and it seems like this kind of thing is manifesting, and especially for the team that I work within Hawkins Brown. We'd like to kind of foster a culture of innovation across the whole practice. And innovation, my kind of subset of innovation in the practice is around technology. And we'd like everybody to know how technology could be leveraged on their project. And it's a cultural shift. It's a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. And we kind of do this through reinforced CPDs, and now these are taking place online. Training in new technologies, and again, this is now taking place online. And then technology study trips, which are less possible at the moment, but something that we would like to continue to do post COVID. We have a series of a number of technology leads that are now a dedicated team within the practice that offer kind of focused digital tech support to our studios. And we're also starting to embed computational designers into studios who kind of split their time between projects and kind of doing digital tasks that are directly linked to those projects. To go into the kind of three areas, automation was one of the things that we kind of jumped into quite early on. I mean, I'd liken this to kind of building jigs. We can create tools that help us to automate and complete repetitive tasks that could be really, really boring and you're not learning much from, and time consuming on projects. If we build a tool to help us to automate that, then we can save time, and that time can be better spent on kind of design tasks or learning new things. So this is one of kind of the very early phase, tools that we were building, and we were making these in Dynamo, which some of you may be familiar with, computational design environment for Revit. And this was really simply just to add revisions onto multiple sheets, which Revit, as our kind of one of our main design platforms, wasn't able to do at the time. And now we kind of have just going to click on, we have like a whole suite of buttons and add-ins that have been developed. So the team that I work within are building these for the office. And usually we get kind of an inquiry from somebody within the practice that's working on a project saying, oh, this is a real drag, like it's taken a lot of time for us to do this on our project. Can you build us a script for it? And often those things are generic. So once we've built that for that particular project, we look at how we can then generically roll that tool out across the wider practice. And it's really nice to be able to build them as add-ins. They're super accessible for people to use whilst they're working within Revit. And the kind of further development of that is being able to kind of automate some of these things. So they're actually, these scripts, these tools we're building are kind of automatically running in the background. And BIM health reports is one example. It would manually take kind of 1 to 3 days to do a kind of audit check of the health of our BIM models. And because 90% of the information that goes into this document, we can actually automatically extract from the back end of Revit. So we can now automate these reports in 2 to 3 minutes. It was a number of months to develop the tool, but this means that they can be run more frequently and improve the kind of quality of our Revit models. and now we're developing that into a dashboard, similar to, I suppose, what Simon was showing with the costing. This is for Revit Model Health. It gives us kind of live metrics and live feedback about kind of how healthy our models are, so our BIM coordinators can kind of better track that and improve and fix things that are kind of going wrong on models. So the next one is design, and this is about kind of supercharging the process through using computation in design. And you may be familiar with Grasshopper. This was kind of where we sort of first jumped in to computational design, and I kind of liken it to Gaudi's. Like, this for me is like, okay, it's not using computers, but it is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about when we're testing computational design. In Gaudi's Sagrada Familia, testing the catenary arch structures through hanging bags of sand. I just saw that and I was like, wow, that kind of looks like it could be in a Grasshopper script. And one of the first projects that we used this on was Here East, and in particular was developing a script to design this dazzle pattern facade, so we could very flexibly adapt the pattern, which was inspired by dazzle ships from the First World War, and the idea was to almost ironically camouflage and break down this enormous mass. The facade was about 300 meters long, so we were using Grasshopper to flexibly control the visual aesthetic of that as like a super graphic, but at the same time close up as dots, and then that was ceramically printed using ceramic frit onto the glass and assembled on site. So that kind of single tool or system, that process, computational design was really key to that, to design and also to produce the pattern files. And then this has developed into more sophisticated tools. So this is a web-based briefing tool that enables us to review past project data and develop briefs for clients. It's an online, pretty professional level piece of software development. And then HBERT, which there was a presentation on Monday. So I won't go into detail, but it's for visualizing embodied carbon through an iterative design tool. And the idea to it is to reduce carbon emissions. And then finally, building and digital fabrication, and we've seen great opportunities in this arena also. So I'd liken this to, you have a whole bunch of different tools at your disposal if you're a craftsperson, and through digital fabrication we can program all of these individual tools to do lots of different tasks and jobs. And we started out with kind of doing small bits of prototyping, 3D printing, and building kind of digital functionality into our 3D models. And then we kind of got the full-scale one-to-one size things with these CNC milled meeting pods at Here East. And again, this was modeled in Grasshopper as a timber lattice structure, and then broken down into cutting files and sent for fabrication. And ES Global, this subcontractor, fabricated these on the Here East project, and they were kind of craned in like segments of a Terry's chocolate orange. And then I suppose that was a precursor to an even bigger CNC cut project, which is the Gantry, which was completed a couple of years ago. And the idea was developing a kind of digital design and delivery toolkit with the WikiHouse fabrication system. So we took WikiHouse's fabrication system and turned it into a kind of digital fabrication system. And we could take, through one piece of design software, generate 23 different forms, different types of studio, and proceed to construction. So that's a bit of a whirlwind of projects, but I think that the kind of the final message is that we've really benefited in practice by using projects as a vehicle to explore new technologies. And as long as you have kind of a constant stream of projects, then you can find ways to implement and test technologies that are relevant for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jack. That's great. You went over slightly, but with just so many good examples there, so it was great. So I think we could give you that. It's just about 8 minutes. Right, I am going to now try to make Fabio a presenter so that he can show us his slides. So Fabio, let me know if that is coming up for you on your screen.
Yes.
Okay,
Can you see my screen? Yeah.
That's looking good. Over to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Fabio Roberto. I'm the head of BIM in Wix On Air. Wix On Air is one of the leading architectural practice, and these are three of our projects: Battersea Power Station, Gateshead Millennium Bridge, and the Gardens by the Bay in Singapore. The pace of digital transformation is accelerating with the coronavirus, people working from home, and companies trying to reduce cost. The results of this process are the increase of remote connection and the online security. The online collaboration, personal training, and improved productivity are other factors that have increased in the recent months. Well, thanks to our IT department, we had a very strong and established process to remote connection, but it can be challenging for many companies. And with more people working from home, the problem is the online security. So then in our company, the online security becomes a priority as well. And it's fantastic to see the speed to adopting new technologies for collaboration, such as the Microsoft Teams and the whiteboard solutions. The online training, it becomes more personal, and you also have more options, such as webinars, digital classrooms, and the online training. So it becomes more one-to-one training, more personal, because we have more time to provide training, and it's easy to access the users online. Well, maybe it's not to everyone, but there are positive points from work from home, and it can increase productivity as we don't have to commute and save time in the transport. It also can promote better work-life balance and the positive environment impact. In terms of technology, we promote the best use of our current tools to improve performance and model data analysis. And the other areas that has increased is the personal training, and you also have developed in-house technology to analyze models and the company data. Well, it's important to understand the tools and see what they do the best. Rhino is one of our tools we use for concept stage. Rhino is more design-centric, and Revit is more information-centric. So when they work together, we can see improve on productivity. And in the modeling process, there are typical three key areas: the free modeling, with normally in the concept stage. We have the parametric modeling with simulation, productivity, and complexity. And in the BIM, we have collaboration, construction, and information management. As you can see, the information management is one of the key points to improve productivity. And these three areas combined is part of our workflow to use Revit and Rhino Insight in our design. Rhino and Revit combined, they are connected to the Grasshopper and Revit API, Revit Visual Coding. And the Grasshopper has a special set of tools to drive the Revit API commands. And in the modeling side, Rhino Insight, we need to use Grasshopper, which is the most used parametric modeling. Now I'm going to speak about the Dyson Institute of Engineering and Technology. This project is a modular pods, and we had the 62 timber pods on the site, and I'm going to show you this project. And they were all fabricated off-site. So this is the site with the 62 modular pods, which is just here. There. And these pods, they are stacked up to 3 pods with a view to the campus to provide a high quality accommodation. Each pod has been designed with natural ventilation and also large triple glaze windows. Each resident has a good view to the campus and the communal spaces to promote integration and social gathering. So these spots are facing to the social area that's around the house. And this is an interesting view. Is the internal view from one of the pods. It's interesting to see the construction site and the pods being placed. And the future of construction is highly connected with off-site manufacturing. And this is one of the pictures on site manufacturing. So it's another photo about the pods where they're almost ready to be placed on site. And it's interesting to see the pods being lifted to the correct location, and also the fine details on the panels. This is the communal area for gathering and social activities. So this is the Daiso Institute of Engineering and Technology, and this is part of the team that has collaborated in this project, and we have received a few awards for this student accommodation. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabio. That was brilliant. It's really lovely to see such wonderful examples of work and the technology in action, so to speak. Right. Okay, now we are going to go over to our final presenter. So Daniel, I'm going to attempt to make you the presenter now. Here we go. And I will turn off my webcam and my mic. And Fabio, if you could do the same, and we'll hand over to Daniel.
Cheers, perfect. So yeah, as all of the other presenters have really covered so far, is some really good examples of how they've managed over the current period. Obviously, before I jump into my section, I just want to give you an introduction to myself. So it's Daniel, we're a technical specialist here at Autodesk, based in the UK. My background's within architecture technology. So obviously, over the last sort of 6 months, we've seen lots of disruption, lots of change, and I think that there's really been no historical sort of disruption like this in terms of modern technology. So we've seen customers almost over a weekend change from what they're doing in terms of working in an office environment to then working from home. And during at the start of that process, we actually gave out EAP, which is an extended access program, to all of our customers to access cloud technology for free during that period, to try and alleviate some of the stresses and issues. I mean, we did see some really great effects there in terms of what customers were able to achieve by implementing a strategy that they had, or just sort of created almost instantaneously. But we did see that there were some customers and some people in the industry that were kind of caught on the back foot, and in terms of not having a strategy in place, then meant that they didn't have enough time to validate some of the appropriate technologies moving to a working from home type scenario. So I think there's been a few lessons learned across the industry, and I think it's just really impressive what's actually happened in terms of how people have sort of adapted themselves. In terms of the past 6 months, though, the world has become a bit more greener. We're not traveling as much. We're able to be a bit more conscious about how we're, doing things on a day-to-day basis. It's given us time back to, sort of have that better work-life balance. I think in some cases, people are still adjusting to, having the family and business with meetings. But what I would say is that, it's had a positive effect in terms of a carbon emissions point of view. We're not traveling, we're not flying as much. So we're becoming a bit more conscious in terms of how we're spending our time. But like I say, it's given companies across the industry to sort of reset how they are working. And it's kind of put a bit of a focus really on, people can actually work from home and still be productive. So, you know, there's always been that shift in terms of, you know, people being in offices and, you know, seeing people working. But I think with the technology that's available now, there's a huge potential to really change the strategy in terms of how projects are delivered, but also how collaboration happens. And obviously taking full advantage of that is so important. In terms of digital transformation, I see personally that some really good examples of what customers have achieved with some of our technology, such as BIM 360 design. Obviously, as I mentioned at the start of my section, with the EAP program, where we gave out the free trials to sort of help with customers, we started to see some trends that towards the end of that trial, people were actually sort of thinking, oh, well, this is a really useful technology. We're actually needing this type of solution because there's really no disruption between working from home or in the office. So we actually saw a large sort of amount of customers actually see the benefits and take that forward and actually implement some of this technology after that period. So I think it's been really refreshing to sort of see how people are changing their mindsets in terms of being quite traditional office-based to then being a bit more agile and, you know, seeing the benefits of what that brings to their companies, but also their projects. So one of the trends that we see is mobility being a huge potential in terms of, you know, how, you know, people are working in terms of accessing talent. Not just that, but also work-life balance. You know, it's more about getting that in place so that really everyone can access the information that they need. And obviously, something like BIM 360 design is something that is really alleviating some of these stresses in the process, because you're able to access your Revit model, you know, in real time. So in terms of each synchronization, we see that, you know, having them delta changes is so useful instead of having to, you know, download very large models and then having to open them. You know, that's not very efficient, right? So we do have the technology to sort of help with some of these workflows, and that's something that I get involved in quite a bit within my role at Autodesk. But in terms of sustainability, I think, you know, that there's a huge opportunity here for, you know, companies, like I said before, like to reset their strategies of how they're approaching their day-to-day activities, but more strategically looking in terms of, you know, what does the business look like in 2, 3, even 5 years time? Because I honestly don't think that we've had as much of an opportunity as we do now in terms of the past 100 years to really rethink that and actually integrate as much green sort of processes into the projects and also how you're working. And obviously, you know, we've seen some really great proactive initiatives globally in different industries such as automotive, and also Microsoft as well, where they've actually become a bit more of a thought leader in terms of the carbon footprint that they've produced. And obviously, most people in the industry are picking up on this, and it's a huge trend that is starting to develop. Companies are actually being measured on their sustainable footprint in terms of, you know, the products and services that they provide. And obviously, when we look a bit further into, you know, construction and architecture, these are industries that typically, you know, suffer quite bad in terms of, you know, it's a great design, but sometimes there's parts that aren't fully considered at the design stage, and sometimes that's to do with deadlines. But in terms of the technology now, we've got embodied carbon calculators, we've got the ability to sort of get insights into what the full effects of certain design changes are. So I really do think this is a tipping point in terms of the industry and how we can sort of reset some of the things that we've known about for the last few decades and actually take positive steps forward, because it's through small changes that we actually achieve big results, and the impact is really where we're focused here. So I'm quite excited about some of the technology that we have to support some of these workflows, and also help designers and customers really achieve better with less in terms of the impact that it has with projects. So that's kind of my section. I appreciate we've probably gone about 5 minutes over, so I might just hand back to Chloe.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Daniel. Right, I'm going to invite the whole panel back in together so that we can have a bit more of a sort of discussion around some themes. So if everyone can turn their webcams back on and we can see you all again, that's lovely. I think we might be missing Simon. Hopefully he's back with us. But I just wanted to, oh, wonderful. Okay, I can see Simon. So, I mean, there's so much. This is a huge topic, clearly, and you can't cover it all in an hour. But I suppose the point of having this panel on is because, you know, you're all with the program, you all get it, you all have shown your companies are transforming. But there are companies out there that are still finding barriers. I don't know if your knowledge of the industry, what barriers you think there still remain, because clearly with the coronavirus, that has been a huge incentive to change the way people work, and it's forced people into working differently. But are there still some barriers, not least maybe financial ones, as everybody struggles to cope with just workload, you know, trying to get new work, all of that sort of thing. I don't know, Simon, if you want to sort of speak to the sort of the industry challenges that still face.
Yes, I'll briefly do that. And apologies if a wood chopper suddenly blasts me out. From a CLC perspective, I think it's really important just to continue to remember how small scale and I'm not going to call fragmented, but how diverse the industry is, and how therefore how varied its uptake of technology is, particularly as you get down into second and third tier subcontractors. And it's notable, everybody here is a consultant. Everybody on this call has been able to work from home. Everybody's good technology. And of course, most of the industry doesn't have that luxury. And I think it's important for us to always remember that in terms of when we talk about the red hot sort of bleeding edge of technology on one side, it's the trailing edge of the rest of the industry, which in many ways is been struggling to cope with the disruption of COVID, and is probably likely to for the next 12 months or so, with, say, for example, reduced product profitability. So there's an awful lot of challenge in the industry, and I think it's just always important to bear that in mind.
Yeah, good point. And Daniel, I don't suppose, you know, from Autodesk's point of view, do you feel your client base, you're preaching to the converted, or are you making inroads, speaking to companies that maybe you wouldn't have spoken to before?
Yeah, I would say there's been a real mix actually of different types of customers from different industries that have really, you know, contacted us to sort of seek some guidance if they've struggled, but also they might already have a good strategy in place and they just want to know exactly what technology can complement their sort of processes and workflows. I mean, just to add, obviously, you know, people have a bit more time to sort of upskill and train. I think it's good just to remind people that we've got Autodesk University this year, which is a free virtual event that I would encourage people to sign up to. And this is an event that is usually in person and you would have to pay to go to see. So it's a really exciting year to try and have a positive spin on, you know, the pandemic. So there'll be loads of classes across different types of, you know, software and topics within the industry. And also it gives people an opportunity to understand and learn from other thought leaders within the industry of how they've gone about, you know, recent events, but also how to plan forward as well. So
yeah, no, good point. And generally to the rest of the panel, I think training and online learning came up in a few presentations about, and I think Jack, you talked about how at Hawkins Brown you try to instill a culture of learning, and normally you would have, you know, visits to see inspiring buildings or projects. Obviously that's out now, can't really do that, but online learning is sort of taking over from there. But does the panel have some concerns about all learning moving to just online, and what do we do for our next generation of young professionals, people coming through who really need probably mentoring as much as anything. And how do you replicate that if you're not in an office environment? I don't know if anyone has got any personal thoughts on that, or company ethos or plans in place to tackle those challenges.
Yeah, I can probably answer that if you want, Chloe. Yeah, so yeah, I think knowledge impartment through online learning is easy, and you can give that way, but actually mentoring and the human connection is much harder through that kind of medium. In our particular business, we've recognized that, and we try and get face to face in a COVID safe way from people. So I think the kind of office of the future will be a place where people come to collaborate and to touch in with each other. I think technology will eventually get to that same level of face to face in terms of you know, in terms of a augmented reality. We're several years away from that, and I think really that human contact, that human interaction, understanding what people are struggling with, understanding the nuances with their faces and how they work. As people, we've evolved for millions of years to recognize signals. We're social animals, and that is just the way we are. So I think it is important that we remember that, and we do build into our training that bit of mentoring. So, for example, we've brought on 8 grads this year in our office. We took our grad program forward. Some businesses did put them on ice. We brought them in, and we brought them into the office. And for the first month of working, they're 4 days a week in the office. Then they'll be reduced to 3, 2, 1, so on. And we put mentors next to them to socially distance them, to give them that human contact, so they get used to that working environment. And I think that is the way we are, and we have to have that mixture between human contact and technology.
No, very good point, Mark. Jack, I don't know if you want to talk about how your practice has adapted.
I mean, I would second everything that Mark said there. I think that there are certain things, certain tasks and certain things that you can learn on your own. You know, on your laptop. I learned how to program whilst sort of training as an architect, doing that. And, you know, because at university there weren't sessions to say, okay, you know, there weren't seminars about programming. So you go away and you kind of do that learning. But obviously I kind of knew that I wanted to learn that, but there's a lot of things in the office that you acquire just through osmosis. You're sat around project teams and there are discussions happening, and you're seeing how, especially, you know, as a younger member of staff that's maybe recently joined a practice, you're seeing how the you know, other staff members in the office are resolving challenges, speaking to clients, communicating with consultants. And there's lots of things that you just don't know that you need to learn, and you absorb it, and you're so being in amongst your colleagues is really important for that. And I think that's a challenge that is very difficult to overcome when everybody's working remotely, and being able to strike a balance between having time in the office, even in a socially distanced office, is important. But obviously we can only kind of push that as much as the government allows us to at the moment. So we're rolling out kind of online learning platforms, as say LinkedIn Learning, and but that's very much kind of focused learning. You've got to tune in because you know you want to learn a certain thing, and this kind of subconscious absorption of learning around the office is much harder to replicate. And I'm not quite sure that we've got an answer to it yet. We're trying to encourage staff to come into the office where they feel that they need to do that, and you know a lot of focused tasks can take place at home. But yeah, we can only kind of go by what the government's allowing us to do at any one time. So most people, I think, are coming into the office a day a week, and they're using that day to have those productive, sort of collaborative, distanced, safe conversations.
Yeah, that's definitely what, you know, we're hearing anecdotally, that people are coming in specifically to collaborate. I guess what you lose is that spontaneity and that, like you were saying, learning almost by mistake element. Simon, so I can see you nodding. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm just going to take a slightly different perspective, which is almost sort of looking a bit further ahead, and that may be a bit optimistic to do that, but to think about, okay, well, what happens in a post-COVID new normal? And one of the strongest bits of feedback that we get from our teams, and we survey them on a pretty regular basis, is that that most people actually really quite enjoy working at home, and so therefore it's not so much that the office is going to be different. It's a sense of the idea in the future it's going to be that not everybody's going to be in the office. So you have to start thinking about what hybrid work looks like. So hybrid collaboration, hybrid meetings is something I think that we're going to really struggle with. And it's interesting, I work with some quite dispersed teams, and a lot of the feedback has come from the people who used to be outside of the office and therefore not present in the meetings. They've found it much better and much more useful with everybody being effectively working remotely, because everybody's equal. And I gather there's a whole new discipline around the management of hybrid workforces. So we'll find head of hybrid being the sort of like the new, or head of remote being the new sort of next role that's coming in there. And that, I think, is going to be absolutely crucial for everybody to navigate that. So not just thinking about the collaboration and the workspace, but actually how you keep everybody together, because that's the future for all of our organisations.
That's a really good point. I think we're in this moment of time, but it's actually looking at what are the next steps and how do we navigate what's coming, and no one's quite resolved that. But this idea of having new job titles to tackle this problem, I think I'll be looking out on LinkedIn for those ones. Thanks, Simon. Okay, right. So now I think probably we've just got time to go round. I think just give everyone on the panel a last chance to maybe have a final word to the audience. Maybe just some final nuggets for companies, individuals who feel either that, they've still got a lot of catching up to do. The companies that we've had here, you've always been sort of trailblazers in this regard, and the self-development of software that you're talking about, that is really quite cutting edge, but not every firm is at that level. So we might have people in the audience who think, well, actually, we've picked up the pace a lot during COVID, but actually the pace of change is it's a bit overwhelming. Are there any sort of pieces of advice of how to navigate? We've had a really terrible 6 months, but a lot of good things have happened. How do people negotiate the next 6 to 12 months? Any pieces of advice? And just pitch in.
Shall I go first with that one then?
Go for it, Mark.
Yeah, so never waste a good crisis would be my advice. So, the COVID has enforced upon us methods of working, particularly for consultants who are all have to work from home. Simon's mentioned mixed mode working. We need to do that now. So now's a good chance to get into that, and that will be good for our workforce in the future. In terms of working on site and subcontractors and modular suppliers, everybody down the chain, now's a chance to take on that innovation. Now's a chance to have a try of it, because we're in the fight of our lives for our businesses to get that edge, to keep ahead, and to keep afloat. So if you can't do that now, and I know it takes a bit of a brave move to do it, but you have to take that move now, because the dangers are that the businesses will go under anyway. The markets will be contracting. So good chance to take on that innovation step and get ahead of your competitors.
Okay, great. Simon, I imagine you echo that.
Yep, and what I'll add to it is that sense of, whilst overwhelmingly everybody's going to be focused in the moment, COVID, Brexit, all of those things, there's a whole lot of medium, long-term stuff going on with clients, particularly in the public sector, who really, really want to change the way we do things. And it might not necessarily be the most logical step to go down that route. Platforms, for example. So I just sort of highlight that, to keep scanning the horizon, recognize what signals the market's telling you and follow those, as well as the immediate stuff that's on the end of your nose.
Great, good point. Anyone else want to pitch in?
Yeah, I can quickly go through. I mean, I think in our practice we've found the best way to develop and innovate is through our projects. And what Simon said, I mean, I really like this, and this is almost the opposite of that, which was that when people have come off projects, they've actually been able to work on innovative things for the wider practice. And so I think it's really important that yeah, if there is downtime between projects, that if you've got creative and enthusiastic staff members that can work on innovations for the wider office, it's a great time to do that. I mean, we've kind of taken this approach pre-COVID, where we were moving project-based staff into a specialist design studio, which supports and can be seconded onto projects, but is also working on general innovations and research and development for the wider office. And so I think a lot of those kind of tasks, with regardless of whether projects, if projects are going on hold, we're able to kind of, we've got a good pipeline of innovations that we can be working on, which is really useful. But obviously you can do this also on projects if it's relevant to the client and it's relevant to the context of the project. Then I would always encourage people to sometimes take a bit of a leap of faith with some technology or a process, and sort of explore that and use the project as a vehicle to implement that, and hopefully it benefits the project, and it could potentially then be rolled out to benefit the wider practice.
Great. Okay, thanks, Jack. So keep innovating no matter what. Daniel, I'm assuming you would agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And in terms of, moving beyond the strategy of, the innovation part and forward thinking of, what the next 6 months, 2 years looks like, one thing that I would say is try and pay attention to where the trends are in the market, because, that's really going to be the area that because that's going to help you win more work, stand out from the crowd, and potentially help maintain or grow your business. So I'm sure there's a few more challenging times still to come, but it's going to be interesting to see what we look like in a year's time.
Definitely, I think we're all wondering that. Fabio, last word to you.
Well, if there is, as everyone said, enough time to improve and see areas to get better in information management is one of the key points, because it's still an issue how you manage information in the industry. So this is one opportunity to improve our process. So.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We've probably run out of time, but thank you so much for your presentations today. So that's Mark, Daniel, Simon, Jack and Fabio. We managed to fit in a lot there. Thanks also to Autodesk for supporting the webinar. Also for the audience, if you missed any of that or want to go back over that, the presentations are all going to be on an on-demand version of this very, very soon. So come back to building.co.uk for that. So for now, I'm just going to say thank you very much again to everybody, and that's all from us. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.